इश्क को पहचान ले, जख्म मेरे हाथ में थमा गया, रुला गया, अमानत सा रखा है, तू आके मुझसे छीन जा। ना सही कुछ ना सही, तू कह तो दे प्यार नहीं, कह दे कुछ तो बोल दे, मेरी रूह है कैद इसे खोल दे। अभी जा अभी जा अभी जा अभी जा, बैठी हूँ मैं तेरे इंतजार में यहीं। अभी जा अब ना सता, अभी जा अभी जा अभी जा, अब ना सता। दूर दूर रह के तुझे क्या है मिला, जरा बता, नहीं रहूंगी तेरे बिन अब एक और लम्हा। भी जा भी जा, अब ना सता, भी जा अभी जा अभी जा, अब ना सता, अभी जा।
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is my performance work titled Baptism, enacted by Umaina Khan, Jamal Ashiqain, and Farrukh Shahab. Gulgee was baptized by the energy of art. He always wanted to be an artist. However, his family situation did not allow him to go to art school. He had to go to school, university on scholarship. So at that time, scholarships were available for engineering. He first went to Aligarh, then to Columbia, and then to Harvard University, and did his master's in hydraulics and soil mechanics. But his love for art never left him. He studied in the great museums of the Metropolitan and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and his two favorite painters were Rembrandt and Velázquez. But he was also aware of the abstract expressionism scene happening around him. It is the 1950s. Then Gulgee, in London, met a woman called Zareen Maladwala, who changed her name to Zaro. He courted her in London, but Zareen, or should we say Zaro, my mother, was a difficult act. She said, Gulgee, I will marry you if the Aga Khan marries us. Otherwise, there's no way. Luckily, he was working for the Aga Khan at that time, and he begged him to come to Paris. So the Aga Khan got them married. My mother borrowed a sari, and they got married in Paris. And then she moved to Karachi, Pakistan. My mother is from Mumbai or Bombay, India. After marriage, Gulgee had the courage to give up his job as an engineer and start being a full-time artist. His early works are representational. He did a lot of portraiture, landscapes, horses, camels, and he was also, but then abstraction started seeping in. For the Second Islamic Summit, I think 1974, he was commissioned to do a large mural and with text in it, religious text. He did use the verse from the Quran, hold on to the rope of God and be together. After he finished his work, suddenly he became engaged with the tradition, which before he had never really dealt with or engaged with. And like he did with his portraiture, by studying old masters, he had a myriad of books, and he studied and he studied and he wrote for the next 7 years. And he mastered a myriad of scripts. This love for calligraphy entered his abstraction. In the museum, in the museum handbook, I've divided its collection into 17 sections. One of them is gesture, where he uses the pen, he uses the brush as a pen, as a column, and it sweeps across the canvas, creating that great gesture. There's another also area of his work which is titled Explosion, which is like Genesis, the world creating, the Big Bang. Gulgee was also a Fahyist. Fahyism is a school started in earlier 20th century France, and they show emotion through color. In fact, Matisse, one of the great followers of Fahyism, mentioned about Gustave Moreau, one of his teachers, and he said, he did not lead us on the roads, but he led us off the roads. He destroyed our complacency. That is the emotion when you look at a Gulgee, your complacency is shattered. The way he uses color, the way he brings different spectrums together. In the 80s, a certain color that he had never used before entered his oeuvre. It was a strange pink that could only be found in Japan. It's reminiscent of cherry blossoms and renewal. Traditionally, he always used ultramarine blue. But then in the 80s, cobalt blue came in. This radioactive, throbbing blue of cobalt. This love for color can also be seen in his sketches. His sketches are not monochrome. He uses a myriad of colors of paper. His pencil changes color. And Gulgee, the sketches in the museum collection are organized thematically, according to subject matter. His great love for polo, horses, camels, and the people of Pakistan. Gulgee wandered across the country he was born in and captured the people there. These people are not passive. They actively look at you, addressing you. You're looking at me, but I'm also looking at you. Gulgee also did a series of portraits of people across history and time. And it was funny because he said, as a portraitist, it's an act of seduction. And Gulgee truly seduced his subject matter to reveal a certain humanity, a certain vulnerability, a certain nakedness that you could see from these kings and heads of state. With Gulgee, everything interlinks. So when he left painting in oils, he took up Pietro Dora to do his portraiture and his pictures and his imagery of horses and camels and polo. Pietro Dora is an old tradition developed by the Florentines in the 16th century. In the 17th century, the Mughals adopted it and became known as Pachankari. But Gulgee evolves it further. His control of the medium of stone, of lapis lazuli, is incredible. When you see the portrait of Aga Khan III, Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah, you feel the energy of this great man who's staring monumentally at you, created out of hundreds of pieces of lapis. The face is modeled, the flesh is there, and he seems alive and with you. Now I will begin my interrogation from my esteemed panelists over here. First, we begin with Madame Farrukh, who I've known for a long, long time. As the CEO of the Biennale, founder of Nukta, an art critic, historian, and an activist. Niilofur, reading your incredible essay on my father, I was struck by how you described his use of gold as a color and the idea of mysticism in his work. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Thank you, Amin, for inviting me on this panel, as well as asking me to contribute to the handbook. I think when you look at Gulgee's work, particularly of the last maybe 30 years or so, the gold takes over just as much as other colors are there. So, as you said, he picked up pink, this fascinating, raw, glorious pink from Japan. Just like that, we look at gold and we say, where is the gold coming from? The modernists did not use gold. But then Gulgee is actually harnessing all that, the culture from around him, the context in which he's born, and gold comes from there. All the shrines you can go to, in fact, if you look at not only shrines, but all holy places, you look at Buddha, how gold leaf, as a offering, you take a gold leaf and you go onto Buddha's statue and you kind of, with your own hands, slowly kind of paste it on that or rub it onto it, whatever the case may be. And if you go to any of our shrines, you see gold offerings. How are those offerings? You see these little dupattas, these little strips of fabric that have gold gota on them. You see these minarets, they have gold on top. So gold is very present in spirituality and places of the saints. So that, I think, is where Gulgee's gold comes from. You cannot separate the color from his offering to the spiritual being, the spiritual environment around him. So I think the gold comes from there primarily. So it's from here, it's from his own feeling of reverence. That's how gold appears in Gulgee's work.
Thank you, Niilofur. And our father always said that gold was a color for us in South Asia. Gold is a color. My next question is for Miss Khwaja, Madame Khwaja, who wrote a marvelous article about the Gulgee Museum. It's funny when you bring someone from the outside into the game. They have insights that you've never thought of yourself, the obvious ones. For instance, Velázquez and Rembrandt, Ms. Khwaja noted, were at the same time period. But then she also noted something fascinating, that there's a movement in his sketches that evoke his calligraphic work, that evoke his abstraction, the play of negative and positive. And I wonder if Ms. you could elaborate on that.
Thank you, Amin. I think this is one of the great successes of having a museum such as you have created, that you can see the time frame. Because sometimes when you see work in periods and not in a continuity, there are things that you miss out on, which appear to you only because you have the privilege of being able to put disparate periods in an artist's life together. And this is what emerged for me when I walked through the Gulgee Museum several times. And the question for me was, what took this man, who was a people's man, but a very private artist, because he never really talked about his own relationship, his introspection to art, what took him from those fantastic and realistic line drawings that captured form so beautifully to those fabulous colors of the cosmos? What was that release in Gulgee? What was the evolution that he went through, which he never wrote about, and which I so wish we could talk to him about, but now we have to interpret his art through the work that is at the museum. And that is where I noticed that there were two sketches. One he had done in the late 60s of the harbor, and one he had done, I think, of a market scene in Karachi in the early 70s. And there was this sinuous arrangement in the composition of lines and an S-curve. And that S-curve comes through in all his abstractions. He completely loses linearity, and he loses himself in the movement of the S-curve. And for me, it was like there was a germ there earlier which grew into a tree which didn't resemble the seed, but it was so beautiful to maybe make that connection, which is speculative, but nevertheless, it is something that the museum is allowing us to contemplate.
Thank you. And you know, you say, oh, I wish he'd been alive and we could have asked him. But my father was famously taciturn about why. He just wouldn't answer it. He was so charming, he could just dance his way away, and you'd never know the reason why. Okay, Shah, Mademoiselle Shah. You know, I really, really enjoyed your essay on my father, putting him in time context, putting him with all of these historical personalities. Could you perhaps elaborate on that?
Absolutely. It was such an honor when you asked me to contribute an essay. And I was at a loss because I'm a writer and art is beyond me, visual art. I look at it, I admire it, I'm jealous of people who can create it, but I certainly couldn't count myself as a visual artist. So I had to find another way to relate to your father's work. And for me, as a writer, I understood what he was doing when I saw his portraits of people, not just famous politicians and leaders and rulers, but also ordinary people, people on the street, people in his travels, wherever he had gone, whatever came to him. As a writer, we are always looking for a way to paint a portrait of characters, but we do that with words. Artists do that, obviously, with their materials, brushes and pens and ink and color. But there is a basic understanding of psychology and what it is that makes people alive and beautiful. And that's the thing that I think I understood in Gulgee's work. Because when I looked at his portraits, for example, the one you mentioned of Aga Khan III, the portraits in lapis lazuli, they were bursting with energy. They were portraying a liveliness and an aliveness of a person who had passed away a long time ago. But he had captured that essential psychology of the person. It was in the eyes, it was in the set of the jaw, it was in what the person did with their hands. These are all details that I look for as a writer to put down on a page when I'm creating a character or when I'm writing about a character. And I also want to say that a long time ago, it must have been 1996 or 1997, I was given the opportunity to interview Gulgee. And I came to the house that you had in KDA. And I was very young and very nervous, and I had no idea what I was going to ask this illustrious artist. And I said to him, "How do you do what you do?" He didn't dance away. He indulged me. He sort of knew that he had to pat me on the head as a child and say, "Well, you know, I just put my pen to the canvas, I put my brush to the canvas, and zoof," he used that word, yes. Zoof, I am taken by energy, and it just comes spilling out. So I think Gulgee was an artist who channeled energy, who understood people, who really loved life. And that was what he wanted to express. And he's found so many ways to do it, literally abstract art, so on and so forth. And I'm just so glad we have the museum to honor his work and to honor the life that he led.
Thank you, Shah. But also what's wonderful about her essays, she puts Gulgee, because Gulgee saw history, right? She puts Gulgee in a historical political context, which I find fascinating. Now, Mr. Fahy-Majeed, sitting far, far, far away from me, which is good. because otherwise I'd hit you.
Hey, Amin.
And I've got a question for you. You never met my father. You're of another generation. And you framed my father using Adab's Huxley, The Doors of Perception. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I think, look, the framing was something that came to me as soon as you told me about the gate that you were making. So when you go in from the Amin Gulgee Gallery to the museum, the Gulgee Museum, there's a gate made by Amin, which is a sculptural work, right? So it's got the calligraphic parts, the deconstructed sentence. It's a beautiful work, and he's called it Heaven's Door. Now, I would presume that most of you, when you hear that, would think of the Bob Dylan knocking on Heaven's Door. But maybe I grew up in a strange context too, where my father had actually showed me Aldous Huxley's work, The Doors of Perception, Heaven and Hell. And this is a sort of a compendium of a masculine experience that Huxley had had. And I just sort of thought that the way in which that connects them is this sort of a psychedelic journey from in Pakistan, based in Karachi, from the 1950s all the way up until today, if you include both Amin's work and his father's work. And Amin was talking about being of another generation. I think that if we look at their trajectories, that covers all the way from the inception of Pakistan to today. And I feel very honored to firstly be invited onto this panel and to be invited to write in this to represent my generation, which is sort of a further one. And I'm happy to see many young faces and old, especially an ancient one over there. But, you know, I think that this is also a really important thing that you're seeing. When you go into the museum, you have to go through the Gulgee Gallery. You're going to see the interaction, and you're going to experience what it means to see, like, wow, like, there are some connections and stuff that between Amin and his father that are really amazing, and two of our most foremost artists. So firstly, I think that's a major blessing to Karachi, and I congratulate Amin and John and everyone who worked so hard to realize that. But there's another thing. As this is a literary festival, I'd actually like to talk a bit about the book as well. It is available here. I've seen that, so here's my plug. But this a bit more. It's actually the first time I've seen it today, and it really shows that documentation can itself be an aesthetic experience. And having this book, it's a substantial book. There's an amazing Gulgee on the cover of it, and there's some amazing writing within it. And I think you see the generational interplay. You'll be able to see the different connections and things that people have taken out. Amazing photos, amazing done by a lot of them done by Humayun Mamoon. Excellent, really. I mean, I would say the peak of this trajectory of documentation that you've been doing, Amin, that as you and John have been collaborating on. So I think that it is a great achievement, this book, as well as the museum. So I would say a round of applause is very much necessary if you can join me. If you could indulge one thing, one of the most profound pieces of writing I've ever read is actually in this book. And I don't know if you're all gonna buy the book. I mean, Amin would be very happy with me if my sales pitches worked. So, go ahead, buy it if you can. But Marjorie Hussain has written one of the most profound things I've ever read. Amin shared it with me in the process of making the book. But I just read it on paper today. So if you wouldn't mind, sorry, Amin, this is a little bit off-piste, so
No,
I hope
please
that's
go
okay.
ahead, Adam. That's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful idea of yours. And Marjorie is one of our monumental art writers who's no longer, yeah. A big round of applause. We love you, Marjorie.
A tribute. True art makes you feel something or think something. that takes you away from your comfortable existence and threatens to shake your foundations. The Gulgee family were by that definition true artists, whether it is in the terrible, catastrophic nature of their destruction, or the many-faceted influences on their lives, or the turbulent history of the country that they served. You will feel deeply when you think of them and their body of work. As a lover of Pakistani art movements and artists through recent times, I now stand, at the age of 92, on the edge of my own precipice, having witnessed and experienced so much, both good and bad. How would their lives have been different had they lived on to their dotage? Would the tributes be more conventional? Or is the ironic twist of the true artist's life a mere reflection of the unanswered questions and statements made in the work, but not quite explained in full? Gulgee's body of work speaks for itself. The artistic skill and mastery are not in question. So much of his great work makes us think deeply. I would not presume to comment on all the many individual works, as I know that the Gulgee Museum will do that with great clarity and context. I just want to say that I feel that my friendship and association with the Gulgee family, parents, son, and daughter, have brought me much joy as an artist and a commentator. I would like to end this brief tribute by quoting Gertrude Stein. Love is not diminished by death. Nothing changes. All in the end is harvest.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you for your wonderful essay as well. It's you know, that's the great thing about to do this sort of experience is it's a surprise. And the way you framed my father's work, I mean, it gave me insight upon it while looking at the paintings. Yes, they're trippy and they're fantastic and they take you onto another dimension. Lastly, there's Mr. McCarry, who's the editor of the Gulgee book. Can you describe your process on how it all came about?
Okay, thank you, Amin, and it's a real honor to be sitting on this panel with all of you.
Speak on the mic.
Okay, I'll try. Okay, again, thank you so much, Amin, and I'm really honored to be on this panel. It's the process of compiling this book was very interesting. As you know, you and I worked very closely on it, and you're someone who is obsessive about documentation, both as a visual artist in your own right and as a curator. So we worked very, very closely together with, I mean, it was a collaborative effort. Most importantly, I have to mention Kieran Ahmed, who is the designer for this book, as well as Amin's monograph, which was published earlier this year. And we sort of worked as this kind of this team, the three of us together. And the first order of business, of course, was the documentation. So we got Humayun Mayman to come in and photograph all of the paintings and mosaics and sketches that are in the collection, which was an enormous task. And then we started thinking about writers. Who do we approach? And of course, and luckily we've got to know many writers over the years. And so we thought, all these brilliant writers. Some, for example, the ones sitting on this stage, and to reach out to them and not say, okay, this is your assignment, this is what you want you to do, but say, okay, consider Gulgee's oeuvre and what would engage you and what aspect would engage you. And what was interesting, because you think, there might be overlap, but there wasn't. I mean, first of all, because Gulgee had a vast trajectory and there was so much to look at and to probe into. And as Amin mentioned earlier, I mean, Bina Shah wrote this absolutely brilliant essay where she discussed his portraiture. But it was not just portraitures you think of heads of state, but it was also sketches he made of sort of, men and women and children on the street. I mean, he had this very sort of impartial eye, and Bina really captured that perfectly. And she also put it into this context of the ever-shifting geopolitics of the 20th century, which is so helpful for the book. And then there were other writers. Niilofur wrote an absolutely brilliant essay about, Gulgee the modernist, and really looking at the work very closely and coming up with wonderful original insights and how they relate to, the visual aesthetics of Pakistan and South Asia at large. Adam wrote this absolutely terrific essay, which, I mean, Adam is someone who knows Amin's work a little better than his dad's, because Adam wrote his master's thesis from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in the US on Amin's work. And so he sort of approached it through, very interestingly enough, the gates that Amin had created, which sort of separate Amin's space from his father's space. And he kind of used this you're crossing sort of these doors of perception. It was absolutely beautiful, beautiful metaphor for his way of approaching Gulgee's work through the eyes of his son, the curator. I thought that worked absolutely beautifully. There were just so many interesting essays. Caduce's essay, Atika Ali wrote a fantastic essay. But as you see, the text is sort of divided into two sections. There's the front of the book and the second part of the book. But as you see, the question was how no one really overlapped, no one said the same thing, but how do you, and also you're dealing with brilliant writers, so they didn't really require any editing per se, because they write beautifully. So I mean, you don't really have to change what they said, but all you have to do is figure out how the words, one voice will flow into another voice. So that's how, so we kind of thought of that we would arrange it so it went from sort of much more kind of bigger picture, more academic essays, and as the book moves towards the end, it becomes more personal. And then it ends with Marjorie's very, very touching and beautiful tribute that she did, which was very personal. So thank you, Adam, for reading that, and thank you, all the writers on this stage, for contributing to this book. And thank you.
And thank you, John, for being so passionate. I mean, this man is passionate. He reads and rereads and rereads and rereads the essays again till I want to bang the book on his head. No, but it's passion, right? It's passion, a passion for a project, passion. And that is just something invaluable. Yeah, and I want to sort of end our discussion, our panel, by thanking all the writers that came aboard this party for Gulgee. I just thank you so much for the writers. Some of them are here, some of them are not here. But it's so amazing, the spirit of Pakistan, that people will come forward and give you their time, their energy, their intellectual, strength to put behind a project like this. I have to mention Kiran Ahmed, who is just the most incredible designer and is fabulous to work with. Her aesthetic is clean and simple, and it's very much up my alley. I thank you all so very much. I thank the audience for being here. Thank you all. Thank you, Ji.
तू इश्क को पहचान ले, जख्म मेरे हाथ में थमा गया, रुला गया, अमानत सा रखा है, तू आके मुझसे छीन जा, ना सही कुछ ना सही, तू कह तो दे प्यार नहीं, कह दे कुछ तो बोल दे, मेरी रूह है कैद इसे खोल दे.